With the WINN FM News, I am Kevin Brown. Our top stories. Nevis Premier continues to advocate for the benefits of the Special Sustainability Zone legislation. St. Kitts Nevis Prime Minister responds to Special Sustainability Zone concerns on Nevis. St. Lucia's UWP promises to scrap levy and cut gas prices. Trinidad and Tobago Prime Minister slams fear-mongering over Venezuela conflict. Internationally, reverse displacement in Gaza. Overcrowding forces families to return to the north. Now, the details. During a recent episode of the podcast Brown Business, Premier of Nevis, the Honourable Mark Brantley, shared how Nevis is charting a path for closer collaboration between sustainability and economic innovation with the highly controversial Special Sustainability Zone. Zones such as these are not uncommon. However, unlike traditional zones in Dubai or Jamaica, the Federation is stipulating that developers commit to more than profits, but to environmentally conscious and sustainability-driven practices. Water conservation and catchment, renewable energy, safeguarding heritage sites, resilient infrastructure to combat effects of climate change. It's about survival.
The idea of sustainability is at the heart of all that we do in St. Kitts and Nevis. Of course, we are the smallest country in this hemisphere, and so it is important for us to take sustainability seriously. We are not just talking about it, we are actually living it, we are practicing it in everything we do, and we are mainstreaming sustainability throughout all aspects of our development, our economy, our education system, our healthcare system, our housing. Whatever we do, sustainability is at the core. And so this idea of special economic zones, as you say, you've been to other parts of the world, whether it's Uruguay, whether it's Honduras, or even the UAE and Dubai, the DIFC is a good example, in China, you name it, these zones have existed. In fact, they've existed in Jamaica, in the Caribbean since the 1960s. The idea then is not new. What we are seeking to do, however, is quite novel, because we are twinning the economic impact that we anticipate from this zone with sustainability. So we are saying to potential zone operators that this is not just about the economy, this is also about building in the infrastructure that will allow us to achieve that sustainable island state status that we have been seeking. So, for example, people who are interested in these zones, developers, there are a number of preconditions that they must satisfy legislatively, which speak not only to the economic impact. They have to produce an economic impact report from a reputable international firm. They must also demonstrate that they will produce their own water. They must demonstrate how they're going to generate electricity, up to 70% of which must be renewable. They must demonstrate, of course, how they will finance their infrastructural improvements within their zone. They must demonstrate how they're going to provide healthcare, how they're going to deal with waste management, and they must demonstrate that they have a plan that is efficacious in dealing with heritage sites, if there are any within that zone, in dealing with historic sites, and of course in dealing with the environment. So it's if you will, the first attempt that we are aware of globally to bring the principles of sustainability into play in determining how we move forward with the economy and with the economic advancement of the country. So I think it's a very interesting idea and one that we're looking to. We already have tremendous interest being shown in these zones. The legislation was only passed a month ago on the 11th of August, but already there is tremendous interest. And I'm so happy that I have the opportunity to discuss some of the details with you today.
The Federation continues to position itself as a sustainable island state and a contender in the global renewable energy landscape, with significant investments in renewable energy and the anticipated development of the geothermal project on Nevis. The Special Sustainability Zone legislation is the government's next attempt at bolstering the sustainable island state agenda. How do you enforce these rules against powerful international developers?
Right. So I think it's an excellent question. And I'm going to be blunt with you. Part of our problem in small island states is capacity. I joke with my friends all the time, and I say that sometimes if you need a particular doctor, there may actually be only one person in the entire country who has that expertise because we're so small. And so oftentimes we have to rely on expertise from outside and to bring people in. In an environmental czar, for example, somebody who's going to come in and assist us. So we're very open to that. I think, however, that every every developmental sort of thrust starts with the idea. So you have to first have the idea, then you fashion the framework. And then I think what this question is talking about now is how do you monitor and how do you enforce? And I think that comes down to getting the right people, having the right framework, getting the right people, and showing the level of seriousness. And I think that that seriousness comes from political will. When we engage with developers, as you say, quite powerful developers, people who are very well financed, sometimes having you know checkbooks, I would say, and profit and loss statements that are much bigger than the country that they're coming to invest in. So we understand that. I mean, when you look at major companies, say a company like Microsoft, I mean, their bottom line is much bigger than most countries in the world. So the reality is that we understand the power dynamic, but it really comes back to political will. And we know that for an island our size, sustainability is critical. Absent sustainability, we will simply disappear. And so this is not just a fireside chat. This is not just an armchair discussion. This for us is our survival. We must be sustainable. We must do more in terms of food security. We must ensure that we wean ourselves off the dependence on fossil fuels for energy. We must have water security, whether through desalination or other mechanisms. But the reality is that we are on the front line of that. There are other countries which perhaps can endure if some part of their country was to become unsustainable, but we simply don't have that luxury.
But I suppose the luxury that you have is
According to Brantley, the answer lies in unwavering political will and mainstreaming of sustainability in the cultural sphere.
Well, that's always the question. And I think you've hit the nail squarely on the head, as we would say colloquially here, because that is the reality. Do you continue? Even in great democracies in the world, great countries like the United States, we see the difference that can happen when one administration changes to another. Different ideas, different philosophies, different approaches, especially in relation to the environment. One president, for example, in the United States took the United States into the Paris Accords. Another president said, no, the US should not be a part of that. So we appreciate, and I think that question is a very legitimate question. I think what my job is, as the person who is currently in that chair as the leader of this island, is in my statements, in my actions, and in our efforts at education, that we mainstream our ideas about sustainability. To say to everyone, sustainability is not a political issue. Sustainability is a survival issue for nation states like ours that are so small. And so for us, it's critical that that messaging be mainstream. So whether it's in our schools, our primary schools, our high schools, our school institution of higher learning, whether it's in our healthcare system, our education system more broadly, you name it, our construction sector, we are talking about sustainability and we're putting things in place to the point where, and I will tell you, there has been pushback. I'll give you a good example. We recently decided to ban single-use plastics. Why? Because single-use plastics ultimately find their way into the ocean. They find their way into marine life. And as an island, naturally, the ocean and the marine environment is very important to us. And there were howls of protests from some quarters, especially people who are small business people who are saying, well, I'm accustomed to putting something in a plastic bag. What am I going to do now? But we have continued with the relentless education, relentless public relations exercise to show people why this is important. And if it comes at a temporary inconvenience to us, that's a small price to pay for longer term sustainability for our country. And I think our people are coming around. We now have our children involved in campaigns in relation to that. We have now a very, very, endearing recycling program with plastic bottles that has taken hold. Nevis is now crushing these bottles and exporting them to be repurposed. There's a lot that's happening here, and I think that can only happen with the relentless effort to educate. And so it's not quite the full answer to your question, but I think insofar as other administrations or other individuals, it is my hope that they would even be more interested in sustainability than perhaps I am, because I think that's the only way we survive.
For many climate advocates, the issue of greenwashing continues to be a concern. To assuage the global environmental commitments, developments, innovations, etc., have been labeled environmentally friendly or sustainable without actually being such. When asked about the risk of developers coming to the island and greenwashing a development, Brantley says the risk of greenwashing is non-existent for Nevis.
So I think that again is an excellent question, but the difference is, Rajan, that many people who label something as sustainable may not necessarily need to ensure that it's sustainable, because at the end of the day, they feel that it doesn't really have an impact. In Nevis, we again go into our size. Nevis is 36 square miles, only 13,500 people. We are tiny.
Yeah.
We aren't even a blip in most big cities in the world. And I say, therefore, that everything that happens here has an impact that is visible, that is discernible, an impact that clearly everyone sees and feels. And so there is no escaping here. There's no effort to say, well, I'm just greenwashing this. I'm just saying it's sustainable, put it all over my billboards and my advertising. But I'm going to do the exact opposite, because the consequences of that for us as a people are very real. And this is the point that I keep making, even in the overall debate about climate change and where we are, that for some, this is academic. There's still people out there who are debating whether climate change is real. There's still some debating whether or not temperature rises are caused by, efforts and man-made efforts. We don't have those luxuries. We are in a position where every year, starting in the 1st of June, we're in the hurricane season.
Yeah.
And as a leader, I tell you, there can be nothing more humbling, let me use that language, than to be in a hurricane season knowing that there's absolutely nothing you can do but pray, because you have no control whatsoever over what's going to happen. We have sargassum in a region in the Caribbean where we depend so heavily on tourism. We have this sargassum that is growing wildly in our oceans because of the additional temperatures, the increased temperatures of the ocean, and that are polluting our beaches all around the region. Thankfully, in Nevis, it is not that big a problem because of our geography, but in our sister St. Kitts, in St. Lucia, in other islands, it's a huge, huge issue with sargassum, and we are having to adapt. And so for us, I go back to the word I've been using, this is survivability. So there is for us an urgent imperative for us to act, and act as one, with one accord as a people, if we are going to survive. And so that sense, and there's no instinct, as you know, as powerful as survival.
Yeah.
We as a people need to ensure that these projects are done properly, and we need to hold the project developers accountable, because it speaks to our very existence and our ability to survive.
The special sustainability zone continues to be challenged, with opposition claiming it is a sellout of the country. However, for supporters of the move, the legislation is seen as a way to invest in the economic stability and sustainability of the Federation. The Special Sustainability Zones Authorization Bill has raised concerns among the public about the sale of land to foreign investors. Prime Minister of St. Kitts and Nevis and mover of the bill, the Honourable Dr. Terence True, during the September 12, 2025 broadcast of the Roundtable, responded to the concerns he has seen raised by the public.
As you know, part of the strategies of many countries is to set up zones like these, like in Panama and even the US, Europe, and so forth, to enhance investment and economic advancement. So this is not anything strange, and it is not a different type of strategy. It is just that we are now moving into this as part of our overarching strategy to diversify our economy. So let me put that forward. So this is part and parcel of what is being done in developed countries. I think countries like ours are now really catching on to the fact that these zones can really help to push economic development. If we want economic development, these are the type of things. Open up Africa, build ports, special zones for development and advancement. Some people call them industrial zones. What do you think industrial site was? It was a special zone. So if you built an industrial site, it was a special zone for industrial activity. Think about it. And therefore, this is not anything new to us here in St. Kitts. in terms of having designated areas that deal with a specific type of economic activity for the overall economic development and advancement of our country. Now, in looking at that with respect to navies, I think it is chapter 10, if you go to our constitution, where I think it might be 10, where it talks about what the federal government is responsible for and what the Nevis Island administration is responsible for. The Nevis Island administration is responsible for its resources. And therefore, I am not even going to comment on what Nevis should or shouldn't do with its lands. If you read the Constitution clearly, what we have is a federal system with a Nevis Island administration. And part of what the Nevis Island administration is supposed to do is to manage its own resources. The Constitution does not give me the right to manage the resources on Nevis. I don't know if people recognize that. Sometimes I see people trying to pull me in. You can't pull me into Nevis affairs. If Nevis decide to sell their land here, what does that have to do with me? That is the Nevis Island and it was specifically set up for that.
The Prime Minister continued to express that because of constitutional protection, the federal government cannot dictate how Nevis manages its land.
Let's say someone from Nevis were to become Prime Minister. They can determine how we manage our land in St. Kitts. But if I am the Prime Minister, I cannot determine how Nevis manages its land. It's a serious constitutional matter, you know. So I say all the time, why are you including me in this? I can't be involved in this. This has nothing to do with me. The Constitution is clear. Nevis manages its lands. St. Kitts Nevis federal government manages the land of St. Kitts. The Constitution allows the fact that if a Nevisian becomes Prime Minister, they can control the land of both Nevis and St. Kitts, but a Kittitian who becomes Prime Minister cannot control ever the land in Nevis based on the Constitution. But you're aware of that? I mean, I'm saying it now, I'm just internalizing it now. Do you know what the serious implication of that is? And therefore, I am simply saying that I have nothing to do with the land in Nevis. The Constitution tells me clearly, Prime Minister, the lands in Nevis are to be administered by the Nevis Island Administration. So I keep out of that.
Dr. Drew continued to express where he would come in under the purview of his portfolio and asserts that what happens on Nevis is up to the Nevis Island administration.
So I hope that the discussion on Nevis and they can resolve their matter. Where I come in is that the federal government is responsible for national security, immigration, customs, citizenship, and so forth. So if Nevis were to set up something that violates any of those, then I wouldn't step in to seek to manage Nevis's land. I will step in to say, you have violated the custom laws, you have violated the immigration laws, you have violated national security laws, you have violated our border security laws, the border, not the land itself. So if the Nevis Island administration and the Premier has a particular project, where I come in and the federal government comes in is to make sure that these laws that I just mentioned that are on the purview of the federal government are not violated. Outside of that, I will please ask the people to please keep me out of that. The Constitution tells, this is why I'm not commenting on it. Keep me out of that, because I will not be accused of trying to take over Nevis's land. Let them settle over their land matter. When that comes to me as a project, I will look at it from the perspective of the laws and what is under my purview and the federal government's purview and make decisions on those. So if you can't bring to me that this special zone is going to violate any of these, it has nothing to do with me. As a matter of fact, I'll say, well, that is what Nevis chooses to do with their land. The federal government is not in a position to stop them or encourage them or anything like that. The federal government just looks over what is under its purview and Nevis handle its resources. So that is where that is. So I would really ask people to really keep me out of that argument that is taking place on Nevis. The Constitution tells me to keep out, and I will keep out.
While controversy continues to swirl around the special sustainability zone legislation, the government continues to tout it as a move to drive sustainability and economic innovation. At the same time, some in opposition and members of the public worry that it is a move that is selling out the country. In regional news, St. Lucia's UWP promises to scrap levy and cut gas prices, DBS St. Lucia reports.
The United Workers' Party has put forward 7 new policies they would implement if elected, including the removal of the 2.5% health and security levy. In an interview on DBS's special report, leader of the opposition, Alan Chasney, spoke about the party's prior success in lowering VAT to 12.5% after its 2016 election victory. Chasney says they delivered on that promise within the first year. This, he explained, resulted in the government's revenue increasing because it put more money in people's pockets, allowing them to spend more. The more they bought, Chasney says, the more VAT was repaid. Therefore, he says it was an investment that helped induce the growth of the economy and helped capture more money for the government. He says that his administration was not successful in removing VAT entirely, as the International Monetary Fund was not in favor of this. Thus, he says their goal changed to lowering the VAT to 10%.
And that's the problem. People lose faith in government when they see a 2.5% levy for health and security, don't see any improvement in health and security, then find out that the government lied to them, told them it was for health and security, and what it was for, it was to secure a loan. And then the secrets, lies, and propaganda. You don't call it a VAT. You call it a levy. But it's VAT. So what this government has done is increase the VAT from 12.5% to 15.5%.
The UWP has also pledged to reduce gas prices within their first 30 days in office, a promise similar to one made during their last election campaign. However, Chasney has been accused of increasing gas prices after taking office in 2016. In response, he stated that in 2015, while in opposition, his party learned that the then government was charging a $5 excess tax on gas, which was $2.50 more than the legal limit. He said that the government reduced the price by $2.50 only after the UWP protested.
So by the time I got into office, they now had a proper system running. When I met with the internal experts, they were trying to deny what we were saying. Because what they were saying was, some months they collected more money, some months they collected less money, and it was the wholesaler that was handling the difference. Now, I know business people. No business person is not going to carry no loss for government. So that was all nonsense, and we're able to come up with the new pass-through mechanism.
Chasney has asserted that his government, when in power, deemed the gas price below 12% to be acceptable. This, he says, enabled them to implement a $1.50 tax dedicated to road maintenance. However, Chasney claims the current government has an opportunity to lower gas prices from $16, arguing that gas should be no more than $14. For the DBS News World, Miriam Montoot reporting.
Trinidad and Tobago Prime Minister slams fear-mongering over Venezuela conflict. Triple T Live Online has the details.
Prime Minister Kamla Persad-Bissessar dismissed speculation that Trinidad and Tobago could be drawn into any military conflict with Venezuela. Speaking to reporters, she responded to Venezuela Vice President Delcy Rodriguez, warning TNT not to provoke that country.
I will dare to do what I have to do to keep the people of Trinidad and Tobago safe, and that is my priority. I've said TNT first. That is my priority. I have no intention, we've had no discussions of invading Venezuela, of stepping onto Venezuelan soil. Nothing of the sort is happening.
With the United States in Caribbean waters, Mrs. Persad-Bissessar continues to welcome them, noting that it's not the first time they're here.
If that can help us stem the criminality, the trafficking, the narco-trafficking, the human trafficking, and the pain and suffering that brings to the people here, then yes, we welcome them and look forward to their cooperation with us.
However, she insisted that Trinidad and Tobago will do what is necessary if its neighbor Guyana is in trouble.
A lot of this fear-mongering. There have been no discussions with the U.S. or anyone else. However, I repeat, should Venezuela invade Guyana, Trinidad and Tobago will definitely step forward in defense of our cousins, our brothers and sisters in the CARICOM.
The Prime Minister pointed out that CARICOM's response has been slowed by recent elections in member states, but insisted unity remains the goal.
I think we've had a little bit of a setback given the 2 elections taking place in the CARICOM and the chairman of the CARICOM. We congratulate Prime Minister Holness, of course, and President Irfan. Their elections would have put I'm not casting any blame here, I'm just saying it might have dampened a cohesive response from the entire CARICOM. But we have always had differences, and that's another thing that is a false narrative. The CARICOM has always had differences, and that's why we say we are sovereign, but at the same time, we speak with one voice. So there are issues that will have differences of opinion.
She also addressed criticism that certain CARICOM countries are fractured over the Venezuela issue.
St. Vincent and Grenadines has always had a different kind of opinion to other members of the CARICOM. That is not to say that we are fractured. On this matter, or the Venice matter, and the Americans in our waters, CARICOM is already fractured. Several members went off to a meeting, the ALBA meeting. Trinidad is not a member of that regional body, ALBA, and made comments and gave statements long before I even stepped onto the plate. So we will have differences, but I think at the end we'll adhere together.
However, the Prime Minister said TNT remains committed to the CARICOM and to its CARICOM neighbours, noting that this country will work with them in every way possible. Sonolala, TTT News.
We now bring you these international reports.
Faraj Ashur is a father of 5. He once walked freely, but Israeli fire left him with both legs amputated. Just days ago, the family fled from north to south to Al-Mawasi in southern Gaza from their home in Gaza City, carrying only what they could.
If I ask my son to go and get food, I will say, and forgive me for saying this, God rest his soul. I'm sorry, I'm sending him to death. He's 13 and a half years old, he's a young boy. Sending him to get food for myself, his 4 sisters, his mother and grandmother. Everything the Israelis say is a lie, and people believe it. People are grasping at straws. They want some security, but there is none, even in the south. I would advise people to stay on their land and die there.
The so-called safe zone where they were told to go was an overcrowded wasteland, tents jammed together, high costs and Israeli strikes hitting nearby shelters. Faraj was forced to make a painful choice.
I went to Al-Mawasi, but the costs were too high, around $900, and it was almost impossible to find a proper spot without paying extra. We stayed 2 days, and during that time a tent next to us was bombed, even in what they call a safe zone. There was no safety there. It's all lies. At first I believed them, but I realized it was better to return to Gaza City. If they're going to kill me, may as well be in Gaza City, rather than risk everything in Al-Mawasi. The overcrowding was unbearable, with thousands of people packed in. There was no space at all.
His eldest son, Yezen, could not push his wheelchair through the crush of people and tents, leaving the family no choice but to return to the north.
We went south to see what life was like there, but we couldn't move through the crowds or the tents. I couldn't even push my father's wheelchair. There was nothing we could do in the south, and we had to pay just to stay in the spot we were in.
Amid the fear, a tender moment is shared. Faraj makes tea and the family drinks together, sharing a brief moment of respite before heading back to the dangers they thought they had left behind.
Many people who were forced out of northern Gaza are returning. Overcrowding in Al-Mawasi, the high cost of relocating, and the harsh reality that nowhere in Gaza is beyond the reach of Israeli attacks are prompting thousands of families to make this difficult decision. Brahim Al-Khalili, Al Jazeera, Gaza City, Palestine.
A young star of the American right and close friend of President Donald Trump, Charlie Kirk was shot dead during a campus debate.
In America over the last 10 years. Counting or not counting gang violence? all I hear is screaming, and I see people running, and all I'm saying is, please God, please God, please God, because I don't want to die. I don't want anybody else to die, and I think I just saw a guy die, you know?
A major manhunt's launched, and in less than 36 hours, a suspect is caught.
We got him.
Charlie Kirk was one of America's loudest political voices, with a huge following amongst young voters. Aged just 31, he was an ally of President Trump and an activist who mobilized those who agreed with him by debating in public with those who did not. In those debates and with a daily podcast, Charlie Kirk courted controversy on issues like gender and race. His death has shone a light on those issues and on others like free speech and gun control, and the partisan divide in America. We'll look back at the 36 hours since the shooting, the reaction to it, and the hunt for his killer. Let's start by going back to that college event on Wednesday. Charlie Kirk appeared at around 12:10 p.m. local time, throwing hats into the crowd at the Utah Valley University as part of his American comeback tour. The event began like any of his other events, but shortly after he began engaging with students, he was asked this question about gun violence in the US.
Do you know how many mass shooters there have been in America over the last 10 years?
Counting or not counting gang violence?
Great.
He's hit by a single gunshot to the neck, and he collapses to his left. Panic quickly ensues, and the crowd immediately scatters. Charlie Kirk is bundled into a car and driven away. Investigators say the shooter arrived on campus at 11:52 a.m. The video was filmed before the shooting. We can see a figure on the rooftop. This video after Charlie Kirk was shot. You can see the person on top of the same building moving across the roof. Some of those who'd been in the crowd as the shot was fired spoke about what they had seen.
The first student got up and they were talking about religion, Mormonism, and Christianity. And the second student to get up was talking about transgenderism and how gun violence has been very frequent with that community. And that is when it happened.
I was watching from pretty close up and I heard a pop. And I thought, no, that nobody's shooting firecrackers, right? This is the middle of the day.
As soon as we heard the shot and we saw what had happened, we all dropped to the ground. And I want to say we sat like that for about 30 to 45 seconds. And then everyone around us got up and started running. They had moved the barricade and we all fled from behind Kirk's tent.
Yeah, we ran about 15, 30 seconds into a building and just went under a desk in there.
All I hear is screaming, and I see people running, and I'm like, it's not safe to run, it's not safe to get up, it's not. And all I'm saying is, please God, please God, please God, because I don't want to die, I don't want anybody else to die, and I think I just saw a guy die, you know?
As news of the shooting began to reverberate around the world and the severity of his injuries remained unclear, Donald Trump took to social media, urging people to pray and calling him a great guy from top to bottom. Then, around 2 hours later, another post from the president confirmed Charlie Kirk's death to the world. Writing on Truth Social, the great and even legendary Charlie Kirk is dead, adding, no one understood or had the heart of the youth in the US more than him. Our North America editor, Sarah Smith, has been taking a look at the reaction to his death.
Charlie Kirk reached places and people other politicians simply could not, especially with younger voters. Frequently debating anyone who disagreed with him.
Okay, so it's a fertilized embryo.
Correct, which is not a baby.
So at what point does it become a baby?
When it is born.
Oh.
He built a huge, devoted, worldwide following.
Are you trying to say that blacks thrive under subjugation?
No, I'm not. I'm saying I'm asking you the question. The data shows they were actually better in the 1940s. It was bad. It was evil. But what happened? Something changed. They committed less crimes.
Maybe they were afraid.
His organization, founded when he was just 18, helped to make conservatism cool and accessible. President Trump has said he would not be back in the White House without Charlie Kirk. He was visibly angry as he addressed the nation and blamed those he holds responsible.
For years, those on the radical left have compared wonderful Americans like Charlie to Nazis and the world's worst mass murderers and criminals. This kind of rhetoric is directly responsible for the terrorism that we're seeing in our country today.
On television, shock, sadness, and anger that sounds very combative.
They are at war with us. Whether we want to accept it or not, they are at war with us. What are we going to do about it?
Charlie Kirk's a casualty of war. We're in this country. We are.
Charlie Kirk was very big online, as was the reaction to his murder, including calls to punish left-wing activists. Right-wing journalist Matt Forney said, "Charlie Kirk being assassinated is the American Reichstag fire. It's time for a complete crackdown on the left. Every Democratic politician must be arrested and the party banned." This clip of Kirk defending gun rights has been used by left-wingers online to ridicule his murder.
I think it's worth it. I think it's worth to have a cost of, unfortunately, some gun deaths every single year so that we can have the Second Amendment to protect our other God-given rights. That is a prudent deal.
A prominent Democrat directly blamed politicians who'd voted against gun control.
People can finger point all they want. Look at the record. Look at the actions of what we are doing. I don't think a single person who has dedicated their entire career to preventing gun safety legislation from getting passed in this House has any right to blame anybody else but themselves for what is happening.
The liberal-leaning TV network MSNBC has fired a political analyst who seemed to blame Kirk's killing on Kirk himself.
He's been one of the most divisive, especially divisive younger figures in this, who is constantly sort of pushing this sort of hate speech or sort of aimed at certain groups. Just, you can't stop with these sort of awful thoughts you have and then saying these awful words and not expect awful actions to take place.
You should be allowed to say outrageous things. You should be allowed to say contrarian things.
Kirk's organisation said he had received many threats against him, but believed in the power of good faith debate to bring people to mutual understanding, if not agreement. They say he's now become a martyr to free speech.
Meanwhile, new details in the investigation emerged. The FBI said they'd recovered a high-powered bolt-action rifle, and they now had a timeline of the gunman's movements.
Starting at 11:52 a.m., the subject arrived on campus, shortly away from campus. We have tracked his movements onto the campus, through the stairwells, up to the roof, across the roof to a shooting location. After the shooting, we were able to track his movements as he moved to the other side of the building, jumped off of the building, and fled off of the campus and into a neighborhood.
At the same news conference late on Thursday, the governor of Utah made this plea for any information that could help catch the shooter.
We cannot do our job without the public's help right now. The public has answered our call for action. So far, we've received more than 7,000 leads and tips. I would just note that the FBI hasn't received this many digital media tips from the public since the Boston Marathon bombing.
With this new information came a clearer picture of how the assassination unfolded. BBC Verify's Nick Beak was piecing together what we knew on the ground in Utah.
Footage released by the FBI shows a figure running across a roof from where Charlie Kirk was shot dead, reaching the edge and then jumping down, apparently carrying a bag, before briskly walking away from the chaos unfolding on campus. The hunt for Charlie Kirk's killer entered a second night. Special agents gathering evidence here at Utah Valley University and elsewhere. So what do we know about the investigation so far? The FBI have released these new, sharper images of someone they're calling a person of interest. The FBI says the bullet was fired from the Lucy Center, some 130 meters away from where Charlie Kirk was speaking. The new CCTV appears to show a person heading for Campus Drive. Investigators say they recovered a weapon, a rifle, over the road. Beyond the campus, investigators have been working to pick up the killer's trail, but there are clues left behind at the scene. Drone footage shows the campus frozen in time. On the roof of the Lucy Center, indentations. The FBI have said they found palm prints and footprints. From this elevated spot, it was a clear shot towards Charlie Kirk.
As the manhunt continued, the US president led tributes to Charlie Kirk, posthumously awarding him America's highest civilian honor.
We miss him greatly, yet I have no doubt that Charlie's voice and the courage he put into the hearts of countless people, especially young people, will live on. I'm pleased to announce that I will soon be awarding Charlie Kirk posthumously the Presidential Medal of Freedom. The date of the ceremony will be announced, and I can only guarantee you one thing, that we will have a very big crowd.
And a further distinction for Charlie Kirk came later on Thursday. Vice President J.D. Vance flying to Utah to collect the casket, carrying it aboard Air Force Two to Charlie Kirk's home state of Arizona. The Vice President's wife was seen comforting his widow. He also leaves behind 2 young children. Friday came and America was gripped by a huge manhunt involving thousands of law enforcement officials. As Americans were waking up, President Trump appeared on Fox News. And this was the moment, a key development.
I think with a high degree of certainty, we have him in custody, right? In custody. Everyone did a great job. We worked with the local police, the governor. Everybody did a great job. You know, getting somebody that you start off with absolutely nothing. And we started off with a clip that made him look like an ant. That was almost useless. We just saw there was somebody up there. And so much work has been done over the last 2.5 days. You know, it's amazing, actually, when you start off with that and then all of a sudden you get lucky or talent or whatever it is.
Soon after, officials in Utah confirmed 22-year-old Tyler Robinson had been arrested late on Thursday night after a manhunt of 33 hours. The state's governor said the suspect had been turned in by a friend of his family.
We got him. On the evening of September 11th, a family member of Tyler Robinson reached out to a family friend who contacted the Washington County Sheriff's Office with information that Robinson had confessed to them or implied that he had committed the incident. This information was relayed to the Utah County Sheriff's Office and scene investigators at Utah Valley University. This information was also conveyed to the FBI.
And so they got him. But the governor of Utah had more to say about politics and violence and the sorrow he felt in recent days. He had this to say about what Charlie Kirk was known for, what he died doing, debating with young people.
Young people loved Charlie, and young people hated Charlie. And Charlie went into those places anyway. And these are the words that have helped me. Charlie said, when people stop talking, that's when you get violence. He said, the weak can never forgive. Forgiveness is the attribute of the strong. The only way out of the labyrinth of suffering is to forgive. Welcome without judgment, love without condition, forgive without limit. He said, always forgive your enemies. Nothing annoys them so much.
Charlie Kirk was a divisive figure. Now, as America prepares for his funeral, his fans and critics alike will have to contend with his legacy.
You were listening to the WINN FM 98.9 newscast. Our top stories were:
Nevis Premier continues to advocate for the benefits of the Special Sustainability Zone legislation. St. Kitts Nevis Prime Minister responds to Special Sustainability Zone concerns on Nevis. St. Lucia's UWP promises to scrap levy and cut gas prices. Trinidad and Tobago Prime Minister slams fear-mongering over Venezuela conflict. Internationally, reverse displacement in Gaza. Overcrowding forces families to return to the north.
Thank you for listening.